Hey everyone, and welcome to Open Door Philosophy. I am Derek Parsons, the contemplator of beauty.
That's a good one. And I'm Andrew, the contemplator of ugliness? I don't know.
Oh, I guess I should have said he who contemplates. It would have sounded better.
That sounds cool.
I'm Derek Parsons, he who contemplates.
And I'm Andrew, he who does not contemplate.
Oh, you're so Taoist. Anyway, hey everyone, welcome to episode 92, where we are going to talk about the speech of Socrates in our third and final episode on Plato's Symposium. So we're going to get some good stuff today for sure. But anyway, other than that, hey, how's it going, Andrew?
I'm super excited for this episode. It's going to be great. I'm recovering from my first allergy illness of my new move, so that's exciting. I think you could hear it last time in the episode.
You were a bit groggy last time. Yeah, not so bad, really. Right. Don't be too hard on yourself. Yeah, the voice of beauty.
Was that last weekend? Yeah.
That was last weekend.
Yeah,
Don't tell listeners.
Last week was a little sick, but I'm getting over it. And that's about it on my front. I feel like I'm very busy, but I don't think so. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's an off weekend for me, meaning I don't have any grading. Well, at least I don't have essays to grade. They're coming in next weekend though, which is fine. Other than that, I mean, I'm good. The granddaughter's coming over this afternoon. We're gonna hang out for a little bit, and the Houston Cougars beat the Rice Owls yesterday. I don't know if you saw that, Andrew.
I did see that.
I must root for U of H nowadays. So so that happened. Thank you for allowing them to have their first victory of the season.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I could make that come true for you. I was at the Duke football game yesterday, and they pulled out a victory. So they're 3-0 for the first time, I think, in years. But
oh wow,
exciting!
Okay, good for them. Who are they playing?
They've played UConn, which is
okay.
They beat Northwestern last weekend, which I think is a little more exciting. But I think they play someone good soon, so I'm sure it will end. Not a big football school,
but basketball.
Yeah, basketball's big. In a few weekends, I will be camping out for basketball tickets. Have you heard about this?
Right. No.
Well, apparently, I've never been, so I don't know. But for the undergraduates, they camp out in line for like 8 weeks at a time to get tickets. And they have to do all this shenanigans relating to it. I don't know all the rules, but they camp out for a long time. But for graduate students, it's just a weekend, so not as bad, but I think it'll be fun. Yeah.
The perks of being a grad student.
That
right. All seems kind of silly.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would camp out for 8 weeks or whatever to get basketball tickets, but also I am not in my early 20s anymore, so maybe it would be different for me if I were 19 or something.
I don't think I would do it, but if it was that long. But are you familiar with this term of, we can cut this out, and I hate even saying it, but are you familiar with this new TikTok term going around called the brat summer?
Oh, I don't think so, but I'm familiar with, there being particular types of summers, like, hot girl summer or whatever it was a couple years ago.
Okay. I think it's something like that, but I asked someone to explain it to me yesterday because someone mentioned it, and I thought you might know because you're usually on top of all of that kind of stuff. But
well, I think I heard of it at the beginning of the summer, but I don't really know what it means unless being bratty is kind of like, oh, I don't know. I don't know why you'd want to be bratty, frankly.
I don't know either.
But my definition of bratty, you're just kind of a pain in the butt.
Yeah,
not too offensive, but just enough to be obnoxious. You're a brat.
That's funny. Well, anyway, if anyone knows, please write in and let us know what it means because I'm very confused. Anyways.
Wait, pumpkin spice season's coming up. It's sweater weather, buddy.
Has it already started?
It's coming. Well, I don't think it started yet, but
at Starbucks,
it's going to start soon. That's
exciting. Last year around that time we met up and got a pumpkin spice cold brew. I think
we did. Was that last year or 2 years ago? Anyway,
that was last year.
Remember. Yeah. There's so like the bratty summer whatever. There's also the equivalent for autumn.
The pumpkin spice cold brew season.
Bratty autumn vibes.
And Bratty Spice.
Bratty Spice. That sounds like Spice Girls. Okay, we definitely have digressed here.
Okay, well,
Okay.
let's get into something. I was trying to do a cool transition. I guess I messed up. I'll mention this now. After last episode, I asked your favorite book. I've started reading Les Miserables. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes. Look at that thing. How many pages is that?
This one is, well, that's the biography, okay, or bibliography. Are we including the afterword?
I don't know. If you go read it, I suppose.
I'm not going to read it. This is 1,460 pages.
Oh, Mamma Mia. Wow. That's a lot of pages.
2 years.
And you've got some dinky little paperback version of it.
$7.99.
Your hand's gonna cramp. You're gonna need to do some of those exercises, the little squeezy hand strengthener thingies.
Yeah, that would be a new low for me, I think, because I take my hand flexibility very seriously. No, I'm just kidding.
So you said you've started it, or you just have?
I have started it. I am on probably page 15. Let's see. I'm on page 18.
We're just getting going.
With the bishop.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So just reading a few pages a day. I can't do more than that, but yeah.
You know, to remind longtime listeners that once upon a time, I played the bishop in the musical rendition of Les Mis.
That's
and
funny.
I sung publicly.
I did not realize you sung for that.
Oh, I did. 16 lines. 16 lines. I sung 16 lines, yes.
How many performances did you give?
Oh, 3.
Okay, 3. That's a lot.
If I had a cool bishop's outfit.
Did they give it to you?
No. Oh, no. It's like hundreds of dollars.
That's too bad.
But, for the next year, I just couldn't help walking around blessing people. I just couldn't stop myself.
I should have let you keep the scepter or whatever the cane is called. The mitre.
Oh, I did keep the little cap thing. I'm sorry. I know there's a better word for it.
Yeah, I don't remember what it is, but
yeah, the little round cap they wear.
Oh, that's not the one that I was thinking of. I was thinking about the big goofy hat.
Oh, no. You'll get this when you read it. He's not really a fancy bishop.
Yeah, he's not. He's very much. He reminds me a lot of Pope Francis, actually.
He's a salt of the earth kind of.
Yeah, Pope Francis gave away his fancy apartments to live in. I mean, I'm sure they're still nice, but he doesn't live in the papal palace, I think, or whatever.
Yeah, I think he's in like a little 800 square foot efficiency apartment or something.
I'm sure he is. He's like he was kind of like that when he was a bishop in Argentina.
Yeah. I'm not making fun.
No, yeah,
it's just kind of funny.
No, yeah.
I think it really embodies, what that office needs, maybe.
Yeah,
frankly, yeah.
Imagine if that was
use
the
a
president.
little humility.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't we all, though?
I hear it's a virtue.
I've heard that. Speaking of virtues,
there's a segue.
It's not planned. Speaking of virtues, I guess should we get into it? Should we get into it?
Let's do it.
Should we finish I have to tell you, I'm so glad that we've been doing the symposium. It's been like a light of fresh air. I don't know if that's the expression.
Light of fresh
breath
air.
Of fresh air.
Oh, there we go.
It's a breath of fresh air to do this. I think I've said in every episode, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
To revisit this stuff. So I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So why is it so enjoyable for you?
Well, I think that for one reason is that I really liked, and I still really do like, but I really liked this whole Greek philosophy stuff, and I still do. But at one point, it was all I was reading and all I was studying all day, every day, and it was just, I really enjoyed it. But as time went on, I stopped doing that, and so to be able to come back and read it again, it's kind of like getting reminded of that time and of the joy that accompanied it. So seeing all these terms again and remembering all of them is kind of like a cool little memory.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yes, you were quite immersed at one point in your undergraduate studies.
Yeah. No Greek no more, but it's fun to come back to. So in these past few episodes, what have what would you say has been our main theme of these past few episodes?
Well, love. But yeah, we're talking about different types of love or interpretations of love. Love can inspire us to do great acts, inspire us to virtuous action. We get some origin stories of maybe how, love came about. We're certainly talking a lot about the god Eros and different types of love. But yeah, I don't know. What are you aiming at there?
That's you bring up some good points. I think that definitely the different interpretations of love is what I think is what we should focus on there probably. Um, but it's all been cool. As we talked about in our recap of last episode, we've looked at several of extremely famous thinkers and writers in ancient Greece, and they've all presented their accounts of love, of course. And we've been saving Socrates for last because that's the most influential. That's probably what Plato was wanting to get at in writing this dialogue. But
Mm-hmm.
absolutely different interpretations of love. Previously to this point, do you have a favorite?
Well, Aristophanes is the easiest one that sticks out in my mind just because it's a concept that's very familiar to me, the whole soulmate theory. But I love Agathon's speech, and it's beautiful. And actually, Socrates kind of gives him a hard time about it
Yeah,
at the
he
beginning of his
does.
speech. But it's so beautiful. It soars, its language like poetry. But I also like Phaedrus's account. It's very interesting to me the idea that love, in the eyes of those who we love, we want to look best, be best, and that can inspire us to virtuous action. We don't want to look like fools or clowns in front of
Absolutely.
those who we love. We respect them, and we want them to respect us. We don't want to be, inauthentic or anything. But I think that I think that's an interesting theory that doesn't get a lot of attention. I think it's very true. I don't think anyone these days would disagree with that. But it's not as flashy, I guess,
Yeah,
as some of the other ones. I don't know. How about you?
definitely. I think I agree wholeheartedly with you. I think for both of the same reasons. I think it's very funny that when I was doing some research on this episode, on the very surface level, people were not analyzing Socrates' speech, but instead were analyzing Aristophanes' speech, which is
Yeah,
just funny. So
yeah. I guess it's a little easier. That doesn't take away from it necessarily, but
no,
this idea of souls, being having a soulmate
yeah,
is a lot, I guess, more accessible to think about, and maybe more pleasant to think about than this sort of abstract, vision of beauty and beauty in and of itself that
yeah.
Socrates presents. I think one's more profound than the other, but maybe a little more accessible, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's right. And maybe we missed out an underlying question that we should have asked on day one of this podcast episode series, which is why should we care about this topic? Why
Mm,
should we think about love? Of course, we can say love is important. I don't think anyone would deny that. But why is it important that we talk about something that we feel? Whereas in something like ethics, it might be actually super important for us to talk about it so we can come up with things like laws and thinking about our interactions with others. But why should we think about love?
hmm. That's a really good question. How did we not ask that in the first
No,
episode? I'm glad we finally got there. It is interesting when I think about teaching different aspects of philosophy for students. Love is always quite low on the list. And I don't know if that's just because the last couple hundred years has been so analytical. So, I think of ethical systems and it's, Kant and it's
yeah,
utilitarianism. It's very calculating. It's very rational. And there's nothing more irrational, I suppose, than love. And it seems kind of a silly topic in a way or just not as serious enough of a topic, for philosophy to deal with. Another topic that we have done an episode on that I think falls in a similar category is that of friendship,
yes,
um, which
absolutely.
again, incredibly important to our lives, our practical daily lives, friendship and love. But yeah, it doesn't get quite the attention that something like consciousness or rationality and yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but it's, I mean, how could it not be? It seems to me it's like actually one of the more important things to talk about, and my students are very interested in talking about it.
Are they
For
really?
yes, for them it's like this idea of like why this one person or why this one friend, out of thousands to school, like why this one person, and it's this sort of mysterious attraction. I don't mean attraction like in a sexual way,
Yeah.
but this mysterious attraction to this person. Again, whether that's friendship or that's romance, it's a really interesting observation. I mean, you're sitting in a classroom, there's 30 people in there. You could be friends with any of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. I don't
I
remember what
think
the original question was. It's like, why should we
why
why should we
talk about
study it?
love?
Yeah, why
Yeah.
talk about it? I don't know. What do you think?
I think your answer, you said something like, but I think it was something like, it's a very human thing. I mean,
Mm.
I wish I would have wrote it down because this would have been a lot cooler. But I think that, you know, if it's important to us, it's something that we should care about.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a naturally human thing, then it makes more sense to me to think about than something that's not related to us. And what do I mean by that? Maybe things like, I think that it would come before even perhaps questions of ethics because of it's an internal thing. It's related to us, and so maybe we should figure ourselves out before we try to think about our interactions with others, which sounds kind of selfish, but I think that it's probably better to think about these kind of things and figure them out before we go around and try to make determinations about everybody else. So, yeah, I think it's an important question.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fundamental to who we are,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that
and
it
and
is.
foundational. And how can you build
Yeah.
something, without understanding the foundation?
And if I was a good social science philosopher, I would have a bunch of data pulled up on uh, on this stuff. But there's been this, and I think I've mentioned this in the episodes before, but there's been this Harvard study that's been going for the past 80 years, or I
Mm-hmm.
think it's actually close to 100 years at this point. But it's been a study which has tracked, it's called the Harvard Happiness Study, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, what it's done is that it's looked at the same people for the time they were college students to the time they died, and they were tracking, when they were happiness, when they weren't, and I haven't read the paper or anything, but basically the conclusion was what made us the most happy was our relationships, uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because it was love. I mean, we were engaging in love. So
Yeah, a lot written on that these days. Honestly,
yeah,
we know that loneliness has been cited not only by the U.S. Surgeon General, but over in the UK as well. Many studies in Europe that loneliness is an epidemic right now,
yeah,
and it has been growing for the last couple of decades, and but it accelerated significantly in the last 20 years. Pullman also, wrote a famous book called Bowling Alone, which is a great book that kind of breaks down how we've gotten to where we are as a society in terms of loneliness and isolation, even though ironically it's the most connected time we've ever had in history. And like the answer from all of these things or these studies are like, go make friends, like go
yeah,
involve yourself in things, go do things that involve community, create community, find your community, join a service organization, join a whatever. I mean, the Putman, I believe. Yeah, Bowling
yeah,
Alone. I mean, his whole thesis is that there was this time in the United States from the 50s to the early 1980s where these guys would all after work would go to the bowling alley and they bowl in these bowling leagues like every single week. They would
yeah,
bowl in a bowling league for like 30 something weeks out of the year. And that created a type of community. And now you go to the bowling alley and it's just, you know, it's not that anymore.
yeah,
It's laser lights and black lights and trying to make bowling fun and cool for kids, bumper bowling and all that sort of stuff.
yeah.
So anyway, I got off track there, but yeah, relationships are what makes the world go around, and that's clearly linked with love.
All right, so let's get into this with Socrates. So today we're going to be talking about Socrates' speech, and we might get around to Alcibiades' speech, but we're going to be really focusing on Socrates' speech following Agathon. He's the last speech of this dialogue, purposely so, because all of the other speakers agreed that they would not speak if Socrates went before them because he would make them look so bad. And
Right.
and if it's controversial if he does, but my impression is that he does make them look a little foolish.
Sure. Yeah, there's this
Right.
notion on, like, if you're at a conference or something and you're a speaker,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes there'll be just a really amazing speaker, and like the
Yes.
next person gets up there, and like the common, phrase is, well, geez, I got to follow that, but okay, here we go. Yeah, you
That's
don't want to
right.
follow that. It's to, anyway.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And so this speech for people who are following along at home starts right around 99 C. The speech of Socrates begins there. And remember, we finished Agathon's speech, and Socrates naturally kind of pulls into this question and answer passage that he's famous for
Mm-hmm.
doing in his dialogues. And this method, of course, more popularly known today is the Socratic method, but it's what they would refer to it in the Greek and Latin is called the elenchus, which is a method where Socrates would take he would listen to someone's speech that they would give. He would take the conclusion that they drew, and eventually he would get them to admit that that conclusion was not true. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, both a conclusion can't be true and not true at the same time. So it would show to the reader that the conclusion that they drew was one which one could not logically hold.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to note, I mean, if you've read anything from Plato, especially his early era, his early period, but also in the middle period, this is classic, Socrates, or how Plato uses Socrates. And it's interesting to me that this is the only place in the Symposium that this particular device appears.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And something I think we did note this in our last episode, but in most of, if not all of Socrates' earlier dialogues, he does not make a conclusion, and he never states a claim. He only
Mm-hmm.
refutes others, and that makes sense if you think about this Elenchus method, which he uses, which is I'm going to look at what someone else says and show that it's wrong, either to
Mm-hmm.
discredit the speaker or just to show that the idea itself is wrong, or both. And you can't present a claim if you're doing that. Now, in this, remember we said that this is Plato's middle period, and so Socrates will present his own idea of love to the reader, so we don't have to worry about not getting an answer from Socrates. Now, if you don't, whether or not you find it as a satisfying answer is really up to you, and I think a lot of people don't, but I think I do. So
Yeah, the other thing I'll say about this, and I think I have this is only adding to what you said. I think I have the correct word here, and that is the Greek word aporetic. Are you familiar with that,
yeah,
Andrew?
aporia, yes.
Aporetic, very very common in the Platonic, the early period of Plato's dialogues, which is, Socrates has these conversations, like Andrew mentioned, and they end without a conclusion. And
Yes.
there's like a particular word in Greek for that.
Yes.
And
It's
so,
a
if you think of like the Euthyphro dialogue, or any of those, Crito, any of those, that, lots of really interesting things to think about. And Socrates definitely needles his interlocutors. There we go. He definitely needles his interlocutors on all their propositions. But really, what he does is he just shows that they're wrong, and it doesn't lead to a particular conclusion. So very very common in the early period. But you're right, Andrew. And this is one of the places where Socrates very firmly lands on a conclusion, even though it's not technically his conclusion.
That's right.
Although
That's
I think he
right.
supports it.
I think yes, we'll talk about that for sure.
Yeah.
But yes, aporia, it's a state of confusion that we are left in. So it's a state, it's a mental state. It's not even just a well, I mean, I think that's what the word should have been would have entailed. And
Mm-hmm.
there's Aristotle writes about this in his rhetoric that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes rhetoricians will want to leave their audience in a state of aporia in order to let them think about questions, which I think is exactly what is the point of it. But
In my class, we students, some students will say of philosophy, like, we never come to any conclusions about anything. We'll spend weeks studying consciousness or weeks
yes,
studying identity, lots of really interesting theories and questions to ask and change our mind on this or that, but we never really quite come to a conclusion. That's not my point as a teacher anyway, to try to come to a conclusion. I'd like for them to come to a conclusion, but they're like, yeah, this, like, we don't come to any type of conclusion, Mr. Parsons. What's the point of this? So, it's aporia. We end in confusion, but we've done a lot of thinking on the way there.
absolutely. And that's probably the most important thing we could do. But we'll leave that for another episode. Let's start out with what Socrates is doing here. So he begins questioning Agathon after Agathon's speech finishes, and I'll skip a little bit over, but and try to hit the important part of this. But he starts off with this question, which is something like, "Why does love desire youth and beauty?" The point that he'll eventually arrive to is that we don't really desire things that we have. We don't desire, and remember, Agathon said that love was the most beautiful and young of the most beautiful and most youthful of all of the gods, and was always
Mm-hmm.
chasing after those two in the world. And Socrates' point is like we don't really desire things which we want, which we are ourselves. We don't desire to have apples if we have 100 apples or something like that.
Right, sure.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And so what he's trying to do basically is he's showing us a contradiction. If love itself wants beauty and goodness, then it's not having it. Its love
Mm-hmm.
is something which, I don't think Socrates would believe this, but is old. And if it's desiring beauty, then it's not beautiful. But
Mm-hmm.
Socrates' point is that, and he corners Agathon into agreeing with this, is that he says, well, are there some things which are good but also beautiful? Because remember, love, I think he was saying Agathon was saying was good and beautiful. And so he's pushing a contradiction here that he wants us to make apparent in Agathon's view. Obviously, things that uh, things can be good and beautiful and lovely too. And
Mm-hmm.
so Socrates is saying, okay, your position is clearly wrong. Let's go into mine now.
Yeah, I like this distinction about essentially valuing what you have versus not. It's true, and also the Stoics warn against this. A lot of Eastern philosophies warn against this. It's the idea of contentment, right? Be happy with what you have. When we're thinking about love and Agathon's conception of it, it's like we're chasing after something. And you mentioned like 100 apples. So Apple just had their, speaking of apples, haha, Apple just had their cool new, what do they call that?
A
Not
release?
exposition. Yeah, they have a big to do. God, what can I think? I can't get Steve Jobs out of my head. Who's the CEO of Apple right now?
Tim Cook?
Tim Cook. Thank you. Gosh, yeah. Tim Cook gets up on stage. We got lots of flashy video, and we're introducing all the cool new stuff. And it's like iPhone 16, I think, is what we're at. And like, I have a
Yes.
12 now. When I first got my 12, yeah, I dumped all the box. I got the biggest, the coolest, the most memory, like everything. I went playing around, and it's called the Max, I guess. And man, for a year, I'm like, I'm the man. I mean, I wasn't
Yeah.
really thinking that, but I had the coolest new phone. But then, of course, next year, well, here comes the 12 or the 13 or whatever's next, and then all of a sudden, what you have doesn't seem that fantastic. And I think this is like kind of what we're talking about here. Happy with what you have. By the way, I still have my phone. I've had it for 4 years now, and it functions just fine. Thank you very much, Tim Cook. I'm not getting your new phone. And my old AirPods are just fine too. Although I kind of want newer
No,
ones.
those are a game changer. The new ones are a game changer. I was like that too, and then I just got the new ones. And
You
those
did
are
buy the
actually,
new ones?
I got the new ones. Yeah,
Oh man.
they're a game changer. I have
See,
to
now I'm
say.
jealous. I'm desiring that which I don't have.
It's the noise cancellation. It's too good. Anyways,
I
Anyways,
digress.
I think I have a deal for you later, so maybe I
Oh,
can. Yeah,
I guess some of your old ones.
that would be so funny.
Oh, not that kind of deal, huh?
Yeah, no, not that good a deal. I think they have a discount for teachers, but um,
Oh.
yeah. So after this whole shebang is finished, uh, something which reminds us a lot of the apology, which we really need to do an episode about. But
Mm,
Socrates comes up and he says, Phaedrus, if you want me to give a beautiful speech, I can't do that. It's just not
mm.
something I have the capacity to do, which of course is a lie, but that's a topic for another day. But he's not going to try to do it. He's going to fail on that, and he doesn't want to do that. So he would a common technique for him to do is that he says, well, I need to be able to do this and do this my way if we're
Hmm.
going to do it at all. So let me do that, and then that's why he starts questioning Agathon, of course. But that's something important for us to keep in mind, that this whole speech that Socrates is about to go on, he's not intending it or intending it with scare quotes to be some kind of beautiful, elegant speech like Agathon, and that's why he starts off with that Elenchus. Now, in this next section, we start our discussion of diatema, and I'll let you take and give us some background on this, Mr. Parsons. But how does he get us here? Well, he says, "Well, Agathon, really, which you think is not that bad, and I used to think that way too, until one day I met this lady named Diatema who just completely left me hanging and turned my whole view around on this. So, do you want to give us any background, or how does this interaction between them go?
Yeah, sure. We did a bit of an episode on her, maybe earlier this year, I think it was. Included her with some significant women in philosophy. So that Socrates includes Diotima in this, and actually refers to her as the expert on this, is really quite fascinating. Women at the time, of course, were not terribly well respected, as certainly how we would think of it in a 21st century way, and they don't show up in any other Platonic dialogues. All the characters in those dialogues are male. But here we have this person, Diotima. And so that in and of itself is interesting and should cause us to question why that is the case. But outside of that, the person herself, Diotima, she's from Egypt. I cannot pronounce the name of the city well. Mantinian. But
Yes.
she's from Egypt. At the time, of course, Greece did have contact with Egypt through trade, and quite a lot of good philosophy was done in Egypt, not only at this time period, but throughout the rest of the Hellenistic period and early Rome as well. Known as a great place of knowledge and information. Of course, the Library of Alexandria is there. So Diotima comes from this place, and so she's an outsider, for one thing, is something to take note of. The Athenians would have seen her as foreign. Also kind of something that's interesting to note that Socrates chooses, or rather Plato chooses this person to render Socrates's views. We're not quite sure if she's a real person, like was a real person as say Aristophanes was. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of that in other writing. That doesn't mean she wasn't, but she is the first woman in Western philosophy that has a
Yeah.
say in anything. So whether she's real or not, or fictional or not, I don't know how important that fact is. I think what's important is, from that particular perspective, real or not, she's the first woman in Western philosophy.
Let me just fill in two more things, but it's great. I think that we mentioned this in an old episode on female philosophers, but diatema, you can kind of hear it in the name. Dio and tema, if you break it apart, means something like one who honors the god or
Mm,
gods. Her title, if we refer to her in Greek, I think is something like Diotima Mantinike, which is, I mean, it's of course where she's from, Ike, but that title also kind of associates with her with someone who's a priestess,
Mm,
or someone who, is able to see, what would we call it, prophecies and things of this sort.
mm-hmm,
And I think in this dialogue too, well, I don't know if we want to get into some Greek history, but she's helping them, as we see in, let me see if I can find it, 201D. Yeah, when very first part of this dialogue, she's advising the Greeks on what to do with this big
mm,
plague that's coming in and all of these sorts of things. And that's not uncommon at all in this time. Women in Greece who lived there, I was about to catch myself. They were not citizens, but they were, individuals of Greek nationality, I guess, and they
mm-hmm,
were certainly not given rights and respected as citizens. They just were not citizens. However, foreigners and foreign women were, um, somewhat similar to men and could, address the polis and make, things of this sort. Maybe they actually could not address the polis. That's wrong, I think, but they were in a higher social position to women of Greek origin, I guess. So something to keep in mind.
And let me just add a tad bit on that. Of course, there were Greek women, like you said, as priestess were very important. The Oracle of Delphi was always a woman. And the Oracle Delphi is something that all Greeks placed a great deal of emphasis on when it comes to prophecies.
Yes.
So no different here with Diotima. In fact, that passage that you read, really what Plato is doing here, I think, when he says, before he starts talking about love, he says of Diotima, she once caused the Athenians when they offered sacrifice for the plague. He's saying this person has credentials. That's
Yes.
what that is, right? He's
Yes,
saying
that's
this
absolutely
woman
right.
is someone that is worthy of listening to. So I think that's just a bit of a device he's using there.
Let's get into the speech a little bit. Like we said, Diotima is correcting Socrates in these ways, and the speech kind of shifts where more or less Socrates is recounting a conversation which he had with Diotima when he was younger, and it's in dialogue form. And I think that we are supposed to be putting in the position that Socrates is in this role of this Diotima character, and Agathon's position is in, so, who Socrates is here. But of course,
Mm-hmm.
it's Diotima presenting this. I think scholars are skeptical that she was real, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I don't know. It's notable that she's in there itself. So, how does this start? Well, basically what Socrates says is that how he just disproved Agathon's position is how Diotima disproved it to Socrates. And so it picks up from that point. Diotima's first point that she makes, which is kind of funny in Socratic, the Socratic world, is that not everything needs to be so hot and cold.
Mm-hmm.
If we say that love is rejecting, or love is always aiming at youth and goodness, that doesn't mean necessarily that love has to be ugly and bad. Things don't always have to be the opposites of themselves, and so I think that's, Diotima later points out that love. Well, do you have anything to add to that point before we keep going?
No, I just think that's right. In a lot of Socrates's Socratic dialogues, he uses dichotomies all the time,
Yes.
opposites of each other. And yeah, she's kind of like on this point. She's like, yeah, good and beautiful, bad and ugly. Not everything is like on the ends of those extremes. There's stuff here in the middle, and we're interested in that.
Yeah, that's right. So, um, after this goes down, she points out to Socrates that, well, you're not really, the way that you're thinking of eros, of love, it's not the traditional view anymore. You just denied that love is a god itself, which she'll end up claiming. And I don't think I need to go into that, but yeah, I'll skip her reasoning why, just for now. But basically, her point is that love, it's not a god, it's not mortal because it's always existing. but it's something more like a daimon, and a spirit, which is
Mm-hmm.
the Greeks believe that there was these called daimons, which I guess is where our term demon comes from, but it's not necessarily evil, but it's something which exists ethereally in the world, which is not God nor man, and which can come in. And she gives this whole backstory account of its origin and all of these things. And I don't know if do you want to go into that?
I don't know if we need to. It's interesting to note, this whole time we've been talking about Eros as a god, that she says Eros is like this intermediary between
Yes,
mortals and the gods. Depending on the translation, it may use the term divinity. I'm trying to remember if I read that.
I
But
believe that they said that it's better. I think
yes,
it's
these
better spirit.
divinities.
Yeah,
Yeah, 203a. These divinities then are many and manifold, and one of them is Eros. So
yeah,
it has this status, but it's not a god. And how important
yeah.
that is to the rest of it, I don't know. But it's
We'll see maybe some implications of that later. And I don't really know why Diotima, Socrates, Plato gives us this whole account of the origin of love as the spirit, one who serves Aphrodite for the rest of or for their existence. I
mm-hmm.
don't know why, but it's a key feature in a lot of Socratic dialogues. These myths, we see them in all of Socrates' big dialogues, and that's it's a point for literature, but maybe there's something there which is interesting here as a spirit, since it's neither God nor human. It's at this kind of halfway point that's always trying. It's always, I think, as Heidegger said, love is something which is always becoming. It's
Mm-hmm.
always trying to move past what I think this dialogue says. It's ignorance and trying to go towards wisdom and these sorts of things. And so I think that's interesting that we think Socrates is or Diotima or whoever is thinking of this love as something which is becoming of itself. Love is never complete. It's never finished. It's always longing towards more.
I
Yeah.
love that. Love is always becoming. You think about, okay, I'm thinking of this from a romantic perspective, but for couples that are together for decades, the love changes, and that doesn't mean it diminishes or it's any better or any worse. It's just that it's always becoming, and never quite reaches its fullness. I don't know. I just think that's a beautiful idea.
I guess I can give my perspectives at the end. But if we keep going, the next I'll skip to around 204D for those who are following along at home, and maybe I'm skipping things, but I don't know if that's where I want to be. But I guess I'll pick up from there. Diotima brings up this really interesting point too here, which is why did Socrates previously think that love is always something which is loving of beauty and of good things? And Socrates says something like, the god of love, or I don't know if I don't think Socrates is still in that position, but the daimoniac of love is always wanting, beauty and good things in order to become happy. And this is, of course, should be a feather in the hat kind of moment for all of us at home who are familiar with Socratic ethics. I don't know really how to explain this next part. Basically, I don't know how to explain this next part well. I'm around 204, 204E, 205A. Eros says a wish for
Okay.
happiness.
Mm.
It's this part where Diotima mentions that, okay, why does Eros, or where she says, why do people who love want beautiful and good things? And Socrates says, well, because they want to have them. They want to, and this
Mm-hmm.
one it says they want to possess them forever. And she brings up this point that's basically like, why do we call? She gets him to conclude basically that everyone wants good and beautiful things, of course. But if everyone wants good and beautiful things, and love is something which is trying to get good and beautiful things, why do we only call certain people lovers?
Mm.
which doesn't, I don't think it sounds as good in the English, and that's what I'm having trouble trying to elucidate, because I think that it just sounds like a weird, translational problem to me. And this is, I'm focusing on this passage because I think this is my favorite passage in the whole dialogue, because this is the big definition of love, and I think it's the best one that
This
we have. Go
this
ahead.
204E 205A.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. It's such a good. It's such a good. But some things just. I'll tell. I guess I'll present it and then I'll tell my problem with it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but she gets Socrates to say, okay, why do people? She gets him to claim everyone loves, good and beautiful things, or wants them. Why do they? Why do they love these things? Well, they want to have them. Okay, well, what do they really want then? And well, why do we want good and beautiful things? Well, because they make us happy. Okay, well, there's a big logical, claim here. To love, to love is to want goodness forever. It's to want to possess goodness forever in order to be happy. And this translated in the Greek is, is our famous and favorite term, eudaimonia. To love
Mm.
is to want the good and the beautiful in order to be eudaimonic.
Mm-hmm.
And we can hear eudaimonic, that daimonic, that demon
Mm-hmm.
that we're saying that love is, and this is the origin of it. And this is like we should have fireworks exploding in the background here, because this is probably the most influential bit of thinking about love that runs through, of course, Plato, Aristotle, but also through basically all of Christian theology right here.
Mm-hmm.
Union. Why do we want union with God? Why does God want people to love Him? Well, it's because we want the good forever. And when do we love people? Well, we don't love people when we love other people. It's not because we're wanting to use them or to have them or possess them. No, it's wanting their goodness forever. It's wanting them to be in goodness, them to be possessing goodness forever.
It's beautiful. And this, we were talking about translation and why it's difficult for a person who just picks this up and reads it and doesn't have any conception of
Yes.
what the translator means when they say happy. They probably just take a very, and then there's no shame in this, of course, but just a very standard view of happiness, whatever that might be. Here in America, especially, we're just hooked on this thing called happiness, because it's one of the big things we have a right to pursue, right? And but really, it's this eudaimonia, which is flourishing. And what does it mean to flourish? And we could talk about that for a bit, but I think with a standard read of not really knowing that differentiation between happiness and flourishing, I don't know. In my interpretation, when I think of happiness, I think of something that, I mean, it's happy, it's good, but it's kind of shallow. I don't mean
Yeah.
shallow. Shallow compared to something like human flourishing.
Yeah. We need to do an episode on this for sure, probably,
Just
because
this term.
well, you raise a I was thinking about this in preparing for this episode, but we had a discussion about this at one point where we were talking about the difference between joy and happiness, and I think
Mm,
we do need to talk about that at one point.
it'd be interesting, but yeah. So for me anyway, when I think of human flourishing rather than happiness, this conception of what love is just resonates deeper with me. There's something more to it there than frivolous happiness.
Yeah, I think that that's right. And this next part of this dialogue, let's get through this next part, because I think it's a cool moment, and where we'll see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of this play out. And it upsets me that um, this ladder of love is a great bit in philosophy, and it's definitely the thing that's focused on in the speech. But this is such a beautiful concept, and I think it's really, in my opinion, it's the most important concept of this whole thing. But whatever, we want the good forever. That's not something that we're going to be able to get in the world. That's
Mm-hmm.
just in the physical world. That's not something that we're going to be able to get. Closest thing we can get to that is to reproduce goodness and beauty. Both in, this is a quote from here. I forget exactly where it is. Let me see. It's so we're in the section 206B to 207A right now. But there's two ways that we can bring, true happiness in this eudaimonic sense into the world. If, eudaimonia, flourishing, is to be in the good forever, like I said, we can't really do that on this world because we can't achieve that form. But the closest thing that we can do is to bring good and beautiful things into this world in two ways. First is in body. Second is in mind, in the
Mm-hmm.
form, in that way of ideas, bringing those into the world. So when we reproduce and have children, that's one way for us to be, achieving love and goodness and flourishing in this world, because we're creating something that's, that's beautiful. When we're thinking about physical beauty, that might be kind of close to the top of the pyramid. And it's kind of funny because I think this is one of these great things where we see that, the natural world aligns with the world of philosophy, where there's just a desire in all of nature to reproduce. It's just like this evolutionary concept. And
Mm-hmm.
so Plato could definitely say, well, hold on a second. Yeah, that proves my point. Everything in nature wants to reproduce because it's an internal recognizing, totality of nature recognizing this principle that we want to create beauty. And so when we reproduce and we have children, or when, squirrels have little squirrel babies, that's just us exercising this longing for the good. And it's quite
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And the same thing goes for us when we create, philosophical ideas. That's a
Mm-hmm.
kind of birth, and that's the only kind of birth that men can, do in this world. And it's us creating, reproducing beauty into this world, and it's quite a fun little concept.
Yashi, or well, Yashi. The translation I have uses the term pregnant. We are
Yes,
pregnant with
many
this,
do.
and wanting to give birth to not only to other creatures, um, which is an embodiment, a very physical embodiment of attempting to pass on the good or create the good, but like back to this idea of ideas being the good. We're giving birth to beautiful ideas, giving birth to ideas that matter. And this is kind of an interesting tie-in, in the Apology of Socrates. Socrates compares himself to a midwife, and
Yes,
a midwife, of course, is someone who assists in birth.
yes,
And so, he sort of sees himself, at least in the Apology, as being someone who assists in the birth of this good, of the birth of these
yes.
good ideas. So, yeah, we're talking about two different things here, right? Like a very physical aspect of it, but then also the mental, having good ideas, having beautiful ideas.
That's right.
We're pregnant with that. In other words, it's within us, and we need to give birth to it.
Yes, and that's why we, I think he mentions Hesiod in here, which is this, of course, great Greek writer. But the fact that we long to these old thoughts from Hesiod and Homer and Plato, and they run through time. It's that immortality of goodness and beauty that's transcending time. It's living on. They're living on. That beauty that's created is living on. That love is that they've reproduced. That they've reproduced in union with the wow, with the form. The form. It's reproduced, and that's why we're holding on to this, because we recognize that there's goodness and beauty and truth.
We're such Platonists.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about this. I'm like, you and I. Uh, I think this is not fair. It's not a fair fight. We're both so biased towards concepts of Platonism.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should try to. Should we like steelman an argument against it or something?
Nah, because we're at an hour and 3 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you take the rest of it, ladder of love and stuff, and I'll just tap out for now for this part.
Okay. All right. Well, the ladder of love. It's the most famous part, of course. And again, there's it's the one thing that people probably read if they read anything from the Symposium. Last episode, Andrew, you said, if this is the only part you read of the Symposium, which is typically what's, if you're in a class, it's going to be what's assigned. Well, you're really missing out on a whole lot of other stuff. We're all working towards this particular concept in
Yes.
this entire dialogue. And, all of Plato's philosophy is hierarchical, where everything ascends. And even if you want to look at this dialogue as a type of ascension, we
Yes.
are reaching the pinnacle here of this dialogue. And we're going to talk about what's called the ladder of love. I think she actually uses that term ladder, at least in my
She
translation.
does. Yes.
But you can think of it, whether it's a ladder, or you can think of it as a pyramid or whatever. So to sum it up very briefly, she says the first thing that we're attracted to is human bodies, or a human body, right? And you can think of this as, I think adults are certainly attracted to other adult bodies, but especially if you're a teenager and you're just beginning to awaken, as your puberty comes online, for lack of a better term, you become attracted to other bodies.
Absolutely.
And this is quite normal, and it's part of our human nature. It's part of our biological imperative. And Plato acknowledges this, especially in his conception of the tripartite soul. It's our urges, right? We have urges. And so that urge is to see a beautiful body and want that body. We
Yes.
find it fascinating. And that's fine. But this is like the bottom of the pyramid, if you will, if we're thinking about this in terms of a pyramid, or the bottom rung of this ladder. It's natural, it's normal, but it's kind of, especially in the Platonic view, it's kind of dirty.
Yeah.
Plato views, a lot of the human body, and he kind of rejects the human body in a lot of ways as something that keeps us from the good. So this is the bottom is an urge, right? So you see beautiful body, but then you begin to notice there's lots of beautiful bodies as you go up this ladder, and those bodies are also quite fascinating to you. But then we begin to move up, and when we start talking about, especially with romantic love, I always ask my students, I'm like, hey, look, at first, it says first cut. They call it the honeymoon phase of a relationship. You're just so in love, it's ridiculous. You can't stop telling each other that you love each other. You're kissing all the time, all this wonderful stuff. But then, after you're together for so long, it's not that desire goes away. It's just that it changes a little bit. And you begin to see something about that person, that there's something more to them than just the outward appearance. And that something is their soul, who they are as a
Yes.
person, their character, things such as this. This is true for friendships, by the way, as well. I believe you begin to see something in a friend more than just like your surface things, like, oh, we both like the Dallas Cowboys, or we both like this type of music. We begin to see something more about them. So we begin to notice beautiful souls. So we're going up the rungs here, and then after we notice the beautiful soul of that one person, we notice that there are many beautiful souls throughout our existence, and maybe we're a bit overwhelmed by that there's so much beauty in other people's souls. And then that causes us to begin to think, and this is kind of the funny leap, especially for students, like, why would this progress to this? But then we
Yeah.
start thinking about beautiful ideas, beautiful institutions. That's kind of the next rung up. And we think about a beautiful form of government, a beautiful form. Oh gosh, what is she? No, I won't look it up. What other institutions, Andrew, could I throw in there?
I don't know, unions. I don't know why that comes to mind to me for.
Student
There's
unions?
things. No. Well,
Not only institutions, but branches of knowledge, right?
yes.
She says here
Yes.
in 210D is where she talks about this. After practices, he must lead him to the various branches of knowledge, in order that he may in turn see their beauty too, and looking now at the beautiful in its multitude, no longer delight like a slave, a worthless, petty-minded servant, which is on the bottom of the ladder, in the beauty of one single thing, whether beauty of a young child or a man, but rather, having been turned towards the multitudinous, the multitude, the ocean of the beautiful, and contemplating it. So not only are we talking about beautiful institutions like government, we're talking about beautiful ideas, beautiful knowledge, and branches of knowledge. And when we reach this point, finally, we just get to the point where we are now just contemplating beauty itself, the ascent to beauty itself. And this begins at 211a. I think this is just some of the most beautiful.
I
Of
agree.
course,
I agree.
here's my Platonist bias coming out here.
Can I read we'll go.
Yeah, I was looking for a quote I wanted to
I
pull, but
have a
go ahead if
great
you have
quote.
one.
I have a
Yeah.
great quote. Basically, yeah, what's the end of this ladder?
Yeah, beauty, the good,
Yeah,
the
it's
true, and the beautiful. That's
yes.
that's that's where all Platonic ascensions end. The good, the true, and the beautiful.
Yes. Okay, that's great. So this is, I think, the most beautiful quote from this. But when someone ascending from things here through the right love of boys, that's the beginning, begins clearly to see that the beautiful, he would pretty well touch the end. For this is the right way to proceed in matters of love, or to be led by another, beginning from these beautiful things here, to ascend ever upward for the sake of that, the beautiful, as though using the steps of a ladder from one to two, and from two to all beautiful bodies, and from beautiful bodies to beautiful practices, and from practices to beautiful studies, and from studies one arrives in the end at that study, which is nothing other than the study of that, the beautiful itself. And one knows in the end by itself what is to be beautiful.
It is beautiful. This is not an aside, but because I haven't read it in some time. But there's a philosopher, Platonius, who was a Platonist adherent, if you will, a couple centuries after Plato writes this, and he has an account of beauty, which is beautiful. It's not too unlike this, although it's a little bit longer. It's kind of abstract. It's kind of hard to describe. But in the end, when you read it, you just see that what we're talking about, this idea here of beauty in and of itself, is beautiful. And it's hard to put that into words, but it is the contemplation of beauty itself. And that's really love.
It's the greatest love. It's, the greatest is love. Yeah. It's the contemplation is the greatest. Yeah.
I love this sort
Go
of
ahead.
a trinity, if you will, of the good, the true, and the beautiful. All those things are just wrapped into one that we ultimately just call the good, right? So what is good must be beautiful, and what is true must be beautiful, and what is beautiful must be true, and what is true is also good. Like they're all interconnected with each other, and we just the Platonist throws up their hands and just says, I don't understand it. All I know is when we connect all these things together, what we are talking about is something called the good.
I can't, I don't think I can add anything else to that, but that's a great way to put it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know where to go from there.
Well, so let's just say that if you're blown away by this speech and you're wondering, oh, well, how does the audience react to this? Alcibiades, who I guess we don't have time to talk about today, comes in and starts messing things up and just starts going crazy with a bunch of flute girls in the background or something, and just messes this up. He got some applause, I think it says, but
Yeah, this is here to 212c.
yeah.
After Socrates said all this, the rest praised him. But Aristophanes tried to say something because Socrates, in speaking, alluded to his own speech. Anyway, that's beside the point. But yes, he is applauded and praised for his beautiful speech.
But then here's some racket. But let me just. Oh, it's getting rainy outside and it's getting dark, and I think my mind is like, excited for a nap or something. Let me just quote from the end of this, and I think this is back Socrates speaking now. Therefore, I say that every man should honor Eros, and I myself, in surpassingly devote myself to the things of love, and summon others to do so. Now and always, I praise the power and courage of Eros, so far as I am able to. Consider this speech, then, Phaedrus, if you will, an encomium to Eros, or if you prefer, name it what you please.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it ends. The
Yeah.
speech, not the dialogue, but
Mic drop.
yeah, it's a mic drop moment.
It is. Yeah, and we got to wrap this up. But
Yeah.
how would you just summarize the rest of it, just like in one or two sentences, Andrew, with Alcibiades?
Yeah, I think that this might not be two sentences, but it's a complete contrast of Socrates'
Mm-hmm.
speech. We see Alcibiades come in, who's led by his passions, in love of Socrates, and he starts basically praising Socrates' virtues, saying how Socrates refuses to sleep with him, even when Alcibiades, is doing some odd kind of things and trying to force him to sleep with him, and Socrates' virtue, how well he fought on the battlefield, and it's really just a praise of Socrates, I think.
Yeah, Alcibiades is meant to be the foil here, a
Yes.
direct contrast to what Socrates just talked about. And Alcibiades, we won't go into it, but he's a famous Athenian general, so he's another real character here.
Traitor.
That's right. That's right. Study your Peloponnesian War, people. But anyway, I don't think more needs to be said of that, other than his actions are clearly contrasting with what Socrates just said about beauty and love.
Okay.
We did it.
We did it.
Is there anything left to be said?
I think Socrates does give a response to Alcibiades' speech. I can't remember exactly what he says, but I think it's basically like, okay, this party's. I think Socrates is like, well, settle down, come sit over here. Alcibiades is kind of, whatever. And then basically, I think the party just goes crazy with all of that stuff. At the end of this, everybody's drunk. And I think that I'll say this quite quickly, but because I just think it's so funny. But I think that what we're supposed to think of when Alcibiades comes in is that he represents the god Dionysus. He comes in, makes everything crazy. And so everyone is like insanely drunk after that point, not from drinking, but from that spirit entering. And so everyone's asleep except for Socrates, who I think stays up in the middle of the night and just keeps philosophizing. And he'll eventually just leave. But I think he just keeps, talking when everyone's passed out drunk.
Yeah, from a literary standpoint, this section of Alcibiades is funny.
It's my favorite thing probably in all of Plato.
He's a total clown. He's totally trashed when he gets there too. He's already drunk, Yeah. It's a funny scene.
It's probably my favorite thing. So definitely check that out if you want to. There's a free translation online that we've been using from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's 35 pages, really short, pretty good translation, I think, too. But if you just want to check that last part out, it starts on 215b. If you're looking on that translation online, it's on page 29 and goes to the end. It's great. It gives a really good biography of Socrates.
Maybe we should do an episode on Alcibiades.
Maybe we need to. Yeah, that would be cool.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up. You got to get to Mass.
I do. I have to go contemplate the good, true, and beautiful.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this three-part episode series on Plato's Symposium, contemplating love and beauty and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I've loved doing it. I have. That's not intentionally a pun, but I have loved it. Let us know if you want us to do an episode on Alcibiades or anything else. You can write us in on contact@opendoorphilosophy.com. You can also follow us and message us on Instagram at opendoorphilosophy. On Instagram, you can also find us on our website at opendoorphilosophy.com. You can send us a carrier pigeon to... I'm not going to say an address. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll know how to find us. That's what carrier pigeons are good for. That's right. Well, once again, we thank our good buddy Kevin MacLeod for the use of his free music that you're listening to right now. It's so groovy. And I guess that's it, Andrew. Remember, everyone, when your life is in need of some philosophy, just open that door and end up at the Symposium.
And come on in.
Come on in. See you guys later.